Hello, my labial love bugs. Welcome back to the lounge. This week I am re-releasing another old gem from the archives. I'm just sort of wheeling out some of my favorite, most juicy or valuable episodes from a couple of years back, and this one was a ripper. I got a lot of amazing responses. You'll be gasping and shrieking and squealing and giggling, and yeah, it's going to probably have a bit of shock factor, a bit of vulnerability, bit of a glimpse into the nitty-gritty details of a lifestyle that most of us are fascinated by but don't have access to. So this week I've got the anonymous Miss K, who's a pro dominatrix. And I get to ask her all the juicy questions that we're all dying to know. So we delve into the world of kink, BDSM, pro-dom work, the ins and outs of having a live-in house slave. What? Yes. Yep, you heard that right. And just all of the wild and fascinating aspects of living this lifestyle. We get into the nitty-gritty details about how she balances this lifestyle with her personal life and marriage, sex and kink parties. The Sex Olympics? What's that, you ask? Well, continue listening to find out. Fuckfest, another thing that we chat about, and the importance of aftercare and ground rules. We also talk about stuff like how to practice domming ethically, her arrangement with her house pet / slave, how to get into this sort of thing if you're newly wanting to explore, and all sorts of other elements of the kink world. So yeah, highly recommend listening to this one, gang. And just before we get in, a little reminder that I'm now back in Melbourne practicing yoni mapping therapy from my space in Eltham. So back in Melbourne for the first time in years. And if you've been curious about this work or haven't been able to access it, or if you've just wanted to work with me in person and connect, I am now in Melbourne. And I'd love to hear from you. So enjoy this episode, my loves.
This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friend with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, my lovely lumps. Or should I say lovely labs? I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge to yarn about all things sexuality, womanhood, holistic health, and everything in between. Your legs. Can never help myself. Anyway, we're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up. You're about to receive the sex ed that you never had, and have a bloody good laugh while you're at it. Before we get stuck in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Menang people. It's an absolute privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content on Noongar country, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're all ready, let's flap and do this. Oh God, is there such thing as too many vagina jokes in the one intro? Whatever, I'm leaving it in. It's my podcast.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up the couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Well. Hello, my lovely lumps. I'm fucking pumped because today I've got Miss K, a professional dominatrix who has a live-in house bitch or house slave, and I've brought her into the Labia Lounge to ask the things that we all want to know about the BDSM lifestyle and domming. And just a little heads up, we're using an alias instead of her name. Because, well, for obvious reasons, totally fair enough. And although Miss K has a pretty impressive list of accolades that I could reel off right now about her career, we're going to keep things pretty anonymous. So I won't be giving you any more info than that about this wonderful woman. So thank you so much for joining me, my dear. I'm really glad that you're comfortable and willing to come and talk about this stuff because everyone wants to know and wants to ask questions but doesn't know if they can or isn't sure where to ask them. So I'm really excited to get stuck into it with you.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to share.
Fabulous. So first things first, how long have you been domming for, and how did you get into it all?
Well, I guess really it depends. I mean, I've definitely been doing this on and off throughout my life. I was giving golden showers as a teenager, basically. And so, there's that. But life took a whole different turn when I spontaneously moved to the United States, which was in August 2019. And I just came for Burning Man, and a friend of mine from Perth was here and had invited me to come and do some work with her as a pro dom. And it was something that I've always been fascinated about, and I knew that I would do it at some point. And so, I just threw myself at it. And so there was a lot of weird things that happened that are very, just very lucky, I guess. I met my slave about a week or two after actually entering that world professionally, and he's been with me ever since. And my partner 2 weeks before that. So
wow.
So it's been a wild ride.
Oh my gosh, incredible. It sounds quite synchronistic, and as though you were kind of in the right place at the right time and everything was happening as it was meant to, because once you did kind of go, all right, let's give the pro doming a go, and let's kind of really commit and dive in, everything just fell into place for you and the ball was well and truly rolling.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's one of the things that I love about just life. Like, I have always believed in asking for what you want. And, sometimes you get, some creepers, and as long as you are able to discern and navigate that, I've always got what I wanted and what I've asked for. And that was one of the things. I found him by posting publicly on FetLife. I didn't ask. I put an application up of like, this is what I want. And I wanted a cleaner for our dungeon space. And I was very specific about all the qualities that this person must have. And and he was the first guy that we actually interviewed, and never looked back.
Wow. So this is you and your friend who's also doing pro doming. You had a dungeon space together, and you brought him into that?
That was right. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Because my next question was going to be like, how do you find clients, and, what's the like interview process? What's sort of usually involved in like setting up an agreement, I suppose, with them, and setting up that container to work together that's in like a really safe, responsible way?
Yeah. So the places that you can typically advertise, there's a bunch of different platforms, and they're always popping up. But the main platform that I used at the time then was Eros. And so there's also like, there's a bunch of online platforms where, you can do videos and stuff like that. So that also can act as a bridge for that, meeting. And, of course, when COVID happened, then I moved entirely online. So that was a whole trip as well. But I would say that in terms of like the interview process and actually like finding an alignment with a client, I always have just had a application form on my website. So all of the platforms that I've used, I've always like linked them up to my website. And then from there would be an application form and my full information. Right. And so that application is designed to give me all of the information that I want and need, so that I can make an informed decision about whether this is a good match. And, often it's not. And, you have to get comfortable with like turning people down. And, it's the same as anything really. Like there's a saying in the Dom community that, you can't be the McDom. And it's, we all know that you can't cast that net so wide that you catch everyone, because then you end up being good at nothing. So
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that applies to lots of different things. So how many
Right.
clients would you work with at any given time? Like, do you kind of cap it at a certain number because it just gets too much, or like, and is this your full-time thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I kind of feel like there's two worlds, because as I said, when I first started, I was doing real life sessions. And then once the pandemic hit, I actually moved entirely online. So it was, just very, very different. And so when I was doing it in real life, I would probably see, on a busy day, it would be 3 clients a day. And that would go sometimes through the week. Wouldn't do weekends, just for, self-care and having that time away. But I would always just ensure that I had enough time for, obviously in between the cleanup, and also like the negotiation and stuff was actually that was done beforehand, so that wasn't a thing within the actual session. But the aftercare is something that you really need to consider. And so as long as you have adequate space and time for aftercare, then I think it's down to the individual of how much they want to take on, really.
Yeah, cool. So what kind of things are, actually, before I ask that, what are some of the different kinds of roles that your clients like to play or identify with, like, for example, as a pet or house slave or doormat, or what are some of the like dynamics that you have in your agreements with clients?
There are a bunch, like the common roles, I guess, would be, the slave, which I want to just say that the relationship that I have with my slave is quite different to most of what most people would encounter. And I say that because, although I met him very early on, that was like just such magical fluke, I have since worked in that world and realized that most people that operate in that world, especially penis owners, things change when you've got a heart on. And when you're, the post conversion is very different. And so, slaves are a common one, but it's all seems to be very limited. So I just want to distinguish that the relationship that I have with my slave is not just like a thing that happens for an hour on a Thursday night, like this is like a live-in 24-hour kind of thing. That said, the common roles that you will mostly see are stuff like sissification. So you get your sissy boys and, your little playthings and house bitches or jesters. And there's, pain sluts and foot sluts. And there's quite a diverse field of people wanting to be different things.
Yeah. And do you have like a particular repertoire? Like you kind of do the slave thing and maybe like one or two others that are your like favorite roles or dynamics? Or are you kind of just like, you were saying earlier, you don't cast your net too wide. What are your like specific, what are your specialties?
I really enjoy playing in the field of taboo fetishes. So that can go in many different directions. And I'll come back to that later in terms of like, it can be a big whole, it's a can of worms essentially, because, when we're dealing with taboos, as you all know, like there comes stigma, comes a lot of questioning, comes the questioning, rightfully so, of ethics. But I would say that what I really enjoy, apart from taboo, is like degradation, humiliation. I like public humiliation. and I really enjoy slave training as well. They're the main areas that I like to play in.
Oh, so just for people who have like no idea, because a lot of this might be really brand new concepts and pretty foreign to people, give us an example of like what public degradation might look like or what slave training might look like, if you can.
Sure. So it does vary a lot, because it really depends on the specific fetish that a slave might have. Like that might be like, hopefully it's going to be service orientated. And so it's, and that's what my slave, is very focused on. But also like impact play is a very common one too. And it's very interesting, because when you think about it, if someone wants to be a pain slut and receive the pain, essentially you're serving them. If you take a moment to just think about that, like, and so there's a lot of I'll come back to this, but 80% of BDSM is psychology. It's not just the physical tools and the act of like flogging, like you're playing with psychology ultimately. So yeah, I would say to round up that answer that, yeah, like service is definitely where my focus is at least.
Yeah, cool. Amazing. Sorry to just like slam you with question after question. I just have so many things I want to ask.
No, go for it. You go for it.
Great. Perfect. So this might be leaping ahead, but I know everyone is dying to know. And when I put it out to my community, like, what do you want to ask a professional dom? Most people were like, okay, well, what are the most out there or like interesting or like kind of, I don't know, what are some of the things that you've done through this work, or some things that your clients want you to do or ask you to do, I suppose that are particularly like sensational or interesting to people?
Yeah. I will say this, that horny submissive men will ask for the most gross and hilarious stuff. And the most interesting request that I think I've had is I had a submissive that really wanted to eat my cat's turds. So that was a thing, which never happened. But yeah, that gives you some kind of idea of how gross they can be. And which I identify in the realm of BDSM as a humiliatrix, and I love humiliation. I find it very entertaining, and as long as it is all consensual and it's ethical and no one's, getting hurt from that, then, I will entertain many requests. But yeah, that was one that, like, yeah, it was a bit edgy.
Totally.
As I said, yeah, my cat did not consent. And so, yeah, I would say that one of the other things that I guess for a lot of people is pretty out there, but, I've done many and I love doing them because I'm very good at it, are golden showers. And as I said, I've been doing that from a young age. I was doing that as a teenager, and I have great aim, and it happens very easily for me. Also, I really like spitting, and I've got a great aim with that, and I can spit like a llama. So, yeah. So that's something that is definitely, I've had a lot of requests for that, and I'm very good at that. And aside from those things, one of the other things that I really do enjoy, of course, and I think this is something that always gains a lot of interest, is financial domination too.
Are you going to elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. You hit me with your questions. And I'm happy to ramble on. And I just, I'm mindful not to go on a tangent because I know we have a lot to cover.
True.
But yeah, financial domination is the act or the fetish. It's money kink essentially, and so it is the act of the submissive getting off on handing their money over to their dominatrix. And so, yeah, it is a very, I would say it's probably like one of the most taboo kinks out there. Because yeah, like we hold money with such power, right? It has such power over us. So yeah, it's a fascinating kink, and there's a lot to be said about it too.
Yeah, cool. I mean, that one's always appealed to me the most, but I definitely didn't have enough of an understanding. I was like, so you can just give me a credit card and then I can just do my thing and see you later, right? But often in these dynamics or relationships, there's actually a fair bit more expected back of you as the dom. I did dabble at one point. I just was kind of like, yeah, I just want to make some quick money, or I want to like kind of experiment a little bit in this world, but it's not really something that I actually find erotic or enjoyable, or I'm so vanilla. I'm just going to admit it. I'm super vanilla. And I did try, I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm pretty open-minded, but I'm still at the core pretty vanilla, because when it came down to it, I was like doing these dom sessions and going through the motions, but like actually hating it and just feeling really sad. And yeah, like kind of wanted to get the benefits, which I saw as like free house cleaning and some money without actually having to be that engaged and invested. And like you said, it is a service thing. So like when, I brought in someone to be a house slave, I was kind of like wanting to just give them a list of chores. Here's the cleaning stuff. Do your thing. I'm going to sit on the couch and read a book or like do my thing. But like he wanted to be basically constantly supervised and spanked and spat on and humiliated. And I had to I was like, well, I may as well fucking clean the house myself. This is like so much harder than cleaning, and I wasn't into it because it's just not my thing. So I think, and the same goes with the FinDom stuff. Like it seemed to be it's like the golden goose to find someone who wants you to financially dominate them. And I just didn't have much luck. And I feel like I wasn't coming at it from a very integral place either, because it's just not it's not my kink. I just wanted money. But it's always just fascinated me, that whole world.
Yeah, it's a very enticing thing. And I think that from, the limited exposure that we do have to that, which is often fleeting, it definitely can appear, and mostly does appear, as the golden goose thing, right? Where it's like, oh, free money, you don't have to do anything. You just tell them that they're, a loser and give me all your money. And then they give you your money and that's it, the end. And that's really not the case. And so what I will say about financial domination is that it's difficult and it's rare. And if someone, especially in this day and age where it's actually quite a saturated market, that I would say, I'm trying to think about how to word this in a without sounding like a complete cunt, basically. I've done a course on ethical financial domination, and that's something that really drew me into it, because when I was looking at this, and I, before I didn't pursue it, I just got requests for it. And I will say that it's really difficult to do in an ethical way for most people, because with the horny guys that come through, there's very much a strike them while they're hot kind of mentality. And sadly, that often means that the ethics and the negotiations at the start that should take place do not. And so there's a lot to it. And, you know, not only is there that to consider, but also you are usually having to manage their emotions. Sure, there are some that come through they're called white whales in that whole world. And the white whale will come in, just have a literal compulsion to dump their money onto someone, and then they will typically just disappear. Accounts will get deleted, and they just, you know, I'm assuming usually feel shame. And so it is a compulsion. And so, you know, with that power comes great responsibility. And sadly, that's not typically what I see in that world. And so it's something that, you know, sure, like there's a great draw for women, especially because of that power imbalance, you know, of money in this world, where, you know, we just want to take that fucking money, and, you know, we're underpaid comparatively with men. And so, you know, it's easy to kind of be like, nah, I just fucking want the money and like go away. That said, like, you know, we really have to remember that there's a human on the other side of that, and there is, you know, largely compulsion involved. And so with that has to come care. And so, you know, for anyone that is considering financial domination, I would just make sure that you approach it from an ethical standpoint, because that is rare, and it's really needed.
Totally. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I'm glad you mentioned that, because even with like, it wasn't like FinDom situations, but I definitely had offers and people approaching me to do some doming work, but like wanting to, and I knew, like, I got to know them a little bit, and I knew like they were like Uber driving for extra cash. They didn't have a lot of money to begin with, but they were wanting to just like give it all away. And I was like, oh my God, I just don't feel good about this. I can't take that in good conscience. So it is, it's important to like have other people's backs when they don't have their own because of the compulsion or, you know, the desire.
Yes.
So yeah, beautiful. And I'm wondering, like, so with your particular arrangement with your live-in house slave, like, does he have another life outside of that? I mean, he lives at your house. It's a 24-hour thing. Like, does he have a job? How does he pay? Like, is there FinDom involved there? Like, how does that all work, like, practically day to day?
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, he does have a job. Aside from his job, I am pretty much his entire life. And so my slave, his family have all passed away. So in terms of like connections to other loved ones, that's where, you know, that is that. So when I found him, he didn't really have any family, and he's very introverted. So in terms of like community, you know, he was, you know, traveling around and kind of, you know, I guess flailing around a little bit, but in a very grounded way. Like, he had his job, and he's, my housemates, are always like, he is so monastic. Like, he has this obsession with China, and he will just like watch Chinese documentaries in what we call his hole, because he actually lives in the basement in our laundry room. And so he'll just go into his little hole and watch Chinese documentaries, and like, that is his jam. He loves that shit. And so, yeah, it's, you know, that's our day-to-day life, is that he will go to work Monday to Friday, and he will serve like a complete devoted house bitch. And then I will dictate his self-care, because that's another thing, is that, you know, with the responsibilities of having a pet, you have to take care of them too. And if I let him, he would just run himself into the ground in an effort to serve me. And, you know, essentially, like, what good is anyone when they're burnt out? So I also have to manage that. So yeah, that's kind of how it works.
And so you said you've got housemates, and I know you've got a husband. Like, how do they feel about it? Obviously, you've got some really beautiful, open-minded legends that you live with. But yeah, I'm just trying to think like how it all how it rolls. Like, yeah, when is it okay for him to come into the communal space? Like, is it only when he's serving or only when you order him to, and then the rest of the time he has to stay in his hole? Or like, does he have to ask permission to leave the house other than at work and stuff like that?
Sure. Great questions. So I'm going to break that question up into two. So
yeah, there was
I
a
have
couple
a husband
there.
and then we have housemates. So when I met my husband, as I said, I met these two people 2 weeks apart. And, when I met my husband, it was really refreshing because I actually met my husband on a Facebook page for Burning Man, and I'd broken my strap on, and I needed to actually fix that, but didn't really want to go to a seamstress. And so I just looked up at who was closest to me. And that was my husband. And so that's how I met my husband, was going to someone's house.
Or he could fix your strap on for you? How did you know?
He had a sewing machine. I just went on a Facebook page basically and was like, I need a sewing machine, and this is what I need to fix. And so my husband thought I'd asked to fix a strap on like a top or something. And it wasn't until I got there and my husband was wearing this wonderful t-shirt that said "The future is female." And he was, we're in California where weed is legal. And so he was like, yeah, sure, you can come around, but I just got really high. So I hope you know how to operate this. And I was just like, oh, great. Like, I'll come get high with you and we can talk about pegging for an hour. And it was like, I rocked up and he was just like, oh, right, a strap on. Okay. I've dated dominatrixes before, and like I had a slave that was also my girlfriend, and so like you're good. And so we had this like really beautiful like afternoon where it was like we just weren't shocked at each other, and I don't usually get that because I live a pretty out there lifestyle. And so it was just nice to be like, oh yeah, it's just your life, like that's just what it is. Yeah, and that's cool.
Yeah.
And we don't need to make a big song and dance out of it. And so like fast forward a couple of weeks and I was just like, like I'm, interviewing people to, clean the dungeon and And, it was always just kind of like, it just flowed, he's always just been so chill about it. And my husband is very, very chill. So, and he also has the understanding. So but my housemates and actually when I met my husband, I was living in a separate apartment, obviously, and not long after, it was like maybe I think 5 months or so after I'd met my slave, my slave moved into our apartment, but he was actually living in the closet at the time, and this closet was like just big enough that he could fit like a single mattress in there. And then it had some shelves for his very like small amount of belongings. Mm-hmm. And so that's where he lived. He lived in our closet. And fast forward to like where we currently live, like, my housemates are friends, and, we didn't ever advertise a space to rent. It was just like, it all just happened very organically. And so they knew that I had a slave, and I, they were aware of it. And so when he actually came to move in to this place where I am now, it was all just like, well, this is my life, and I do like to live. We all like to live unapologetically. And so it was definitely a moment of, well, this is how it's going to be. And, you've moved in here organically. So, this is the deal. And, totally. This is what you're signing up for. And, there's definitely been moments where like early on, I didn't want to like totally fucking wig them out. And I had I guess we kind of like broke them in easily, you might say. And we just kind of like, you know, we didn't go too intense. And as time has gone on and like we've just all been living together for a year now, it's hilarious. Like this morning, my housemate wanted to buy my slave a croissant, and we always joke because he says he eats slave gruel, and his slave gruel is just like a bunch of vegetables that are roasted, and that's it. And we're all vegan, so you know, I'm all for veggies, but yeah, what he eats is very basic, and so I had to kind of like, you know, coerce him with my housemate, who is just like, you know, what we're gonna do is we're gonna like put this croissant on the floor, because he didn't want the croissant. He feels like, you know, he just wants to be a slave and have his slave rule. Like, we're just gonna put this croissant on the floor and we're gonna smash it into the floor, and you're gonna fucking eat it, okay? And we had to dress it up, essentially, for him to actually go for it.
Dress
and
it
so
down.
Now we have this whole, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so we have this like, you know, whole thing going on now where like they get him and they understand that we have this like really strange dynamic, and there's always weird shit going on in this house anyway. And so now it's just, you know, it's a wonderful weird family that I have.
Yeah, fabulous. I love that. And I love, like, you would just be such a beautiful, loving, ethical, considerate mistress to have. Like, I love that you're, like, forcing him to eat croissants so that he gets, like, oh, it was your housemate, but, you know, you were in cahoots trying to just, like, get him to treat himself every now and then and make sure he's doing self-care and things like that. So that's really, yeah, it's heartening to think about. He's really lucky to have found you. I mean, you're lucky to have found each other. It seems like a match made in heaven.
Yeah. It absolutely is.
Yeah, cool. Amazing. I want to come and like hang out at your house. That sounds so fascinating. I bet there'd be so much kooky shit going on.
There is, and you are totally welcome to be here.
Oh, one day when international travel is possible for me again.
Yes.
So I'm going to slot in the segment Get Pregnant and Die.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise?
Are you ready for this, Miss Kate?
As ready as I will ever be.
Fabulous. So pretty much it's, you know, your stock standard, why with sex education shit, how did it fail you? What would you have preferred to have learned about? I mean, obviously you didn't get taught how to do golden showers, but you were okay anyway, still killing it on the aim. But yeah, do you have a story of how your sex education failed you, basically? Hey, Babe Towns. So sorry to interrupt, but I simply had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that you've got to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. And there you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies or discounts for offerings from guests who've been interviewed on the podcast, inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, and support from a community of labial legends. So head over to the links in the show notes and I'll hopefully see you in there. And now, back to the episode.
Oh, yeah, huge. So I had the same sex ed that most of us had, which obviously, as you just said, totally failed us. And I was very sexually active very young. I lost my virginity when I was just turning 13. And so,
wow.
Yeah, and I was like really just like, I was like a dog on heat. And I just wanted to fuck everything, basically. But I was like very underage. And this was, you know, it was tough to navigate. That said, I made some very bad decisions along that way of navigating that path. And so I feel like what I really needed in that time, and this might have come from my parents, but it did not, was guidance on how to express that that sexual desire in a healthy and safe way. And that might have just been that I had a talk about exploring self-pleasure and knowing yourself in that way before inviting others into that realm. And, you know, maybe like the pros and cons of using a vibrator before, like, you know, like getting to know your hand skills before you jump onto a vibrator. Because what I found was that I became very addicted, and, you know, I looked older than what I was, so I was able to go out and just buy a vibrator, but I didn't really know what the fuck I was doing. And so, yeah, I really wish that I had had that guidance of, like, you know, well, sure, you're like really, you're a horny teen, but you're not legal yet. And, you know, there's so much that you can do with yourself before you actually go into experiencing that with others. And, you know, also, like, what would have been helpful was, like, you know, thinking about, like, you know, having an adult tell me, like, you know, what to look out for in a sexual partner. And because, you know, there's a bunch of douchebags at that age, and, you know, it's a really tricky thing to navigate. So, yeah, I think whether that was, you know, I mean, I'm sure that would have been very difficult for a teacher to have that conversation, and they probably would have lost their jobs had that have happened. But, like, I feel like parents, like, really need to, I really urge parents to, like, step up in that way, because now what we're seeing is, you know, like 10-year-olds have access to porn, and, you know, it's a really terrifying world. And so we need to be having these conversations, like, when our kids are, like, you know, around the age of 10, really.
So much earlier than you think, really. Totally. Amazing. Thank you. So I'm just going to launch straight back into all of my juicy questions, if that's okay.
Hit me.
So what, like, with your relationship with your slave, is it, because I think a lot of people, there's, like, some misconceptions and get confused about, like, whether it's, like, explicitly sexual or whether it's more of an erotic kink thing, but there's actually no sex that goes on. So I just want to, like, clear that up for people. Is it a sexual thing? Do you engage sexually with your slave? That's my first question.
Great question. And yes, you're right. There's a lot of misconceptions. And again, I'll go back to, I feel like I'm bragging when I say this, and I'm really not. But my slave is just not the typical slave. Like, most slaves that we encounter are very focused on getting their rocks off. And, you know, it's like you said, like, when you had someone come around to clean, like, they just want to get beaten and, you know, all the things. And it's just like, who's serving who here? Like, you know, like, is this actual, am I serving you? Because it feels that way. And so I'm really fortunate to have a slave that it's a lifestyle for him. As I said, this is not just something that he does on a Thursday night when he has an hour and he feels horny. And in fact, I've never seen my slave naked ever, and nor will I ever want to. It's a running joke that I'm just like, ew, like, I don't want to see you naked, like, gross. And but, you know, I'm always naked. I'm always running around the house naked, and you know, we all are here. And it's definitely not a sexual thing. And something really beautiful happened quite early on in our relationship. It was a few months into COVID, and I'd given him a sock because his main, like, desire is to, and fetish is to have socks and shoes and anything to do with feet. That's his jam. It's his toe jam. And so I gave him a sock, and I was like, you know, go in the closet and do your thing. And we had this conversation afterwards where he was just like, it made him uncomfortable. And at the time, like I said, it was earlier in our dynamic, and I guess I just made the assumption that he was masturbating with my socks.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this conversation, and I made this off the cuff comment, which I, didn't think would stick. And I just said, I don't ever want you to masturbate ever again. And I was playing when I said this, and he took it so seriously, and it was so liberating for him. And he actually, like, masturbation is something that, because I think he's so monastic, that masturbation kind of takes him out of that grounded headspace where he is like so devoted. And so we do not have a sexual dynamic whatsoever. We've done some wild shit together. And, he has featured in a bunch of my videos and stuff like that. And, we've done all sorts, but none of it has been sexual. And he makes me feel so safe. And this was one of the part of the conversation that we had when he was like, telling me about how he really didn't want to masturbate ever again. And it was like such a relief for him, which, I messaged you just before when we were getting ready to come on this podcast. And, I was like, I'm just masturbating. And masturbating, as you know, is like, it's a huge part of our lives. We're vagina lovers. And so, and I encourage that for men too. I want to say that I'm a huge lover of men. And so it's not anything to do with like, a gender thing, but he is just so very monastic that sex or any kind of sexual activity for him makes him feel very uncomfortable and takes him out of that very meditative, grounded state, which he literally resides in. And so, and to just like give some kind of idea of what his energy is like, because I realized that kind of information might sound like he's being shut down. And his energy, everyone that I know that, that I introduced to him, they're always like, wow, he's like a child. He's like a little joyful boy. And so, and he really is. So when you think about like someone with that kind of energy who has, this very devout world, he's kind of like a celibate monk.
Well, I was just going to say, he sounds like he would be the perfect monk. Like, it's all about devotion and, anything like sexual energy or desire kind of like it distracts you from that main devotional practice, or like that, being grounded in that space. So I mean, it didn't sound to me like he was sacrificing anything. It just sounded like, oh, actually that gave him permission to just fully embody and live in that devotional space without the sort of distraction or the complication of sexual energy,
Exactly. And that's exactly on point. Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah, wow, so interesting. So then what about your primary sexual relationship with your husband? Like, do you bring a lot of kink into your own sex life with him?
Yes, we do. And so in my world, I'm a switch, and the switch is someone that will be dominant and submissive. And I really love to submit to my husband. He's my dominant. And so we do explore a lot of things, and we have an open marriage as well. So our world is pretty kinky, and I like to explore like lots of different things. And on the weekend, in fact, I was dressed as a baby, a very cute baby, and I was pole dancing. at a sex party at our house, and it was people felt very conflicted by it because apparently I was very cute and sexy, but I was dressed in a diaper and a little bib. I had a cum bib on. And so, yeah,
bib.
it got some responses. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so because I was about to ask, like, do you go to kink parties and BDSM parties? Obviously, you're hosting them at your house as well. So, like, tell me about that. What are some of the things that, I mean, you keep being like, oh, we've done some wild stuff. And I'm like, come on, give me more than that. Like, give us some stories or some examples of this, you know?
Oh, man. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, we've been to orgies that are just, I'll tell you like one of my favorite experiences because like with anything, when you are doing a lot of something, it's hard to kind of pinpoint one thing. I'll tell you one of my favorite experiences. And this was there's a beautiful community of people that I have in San Francisco, and I attended an orgy there with about 40 people, and we hired this like just fucking grand, amazing mansion on Airbnb, and the organizers of this event had made it into a very ritualistic space where it was like we all had the same gowns, and we were all like, you know, wearing the same. It was like a temple kind of space, but it was described to me when I found this event as a theatrical orgiastic revelry, and we had a circle of 69, and our beautiful MC was strumming away Bryan Adams in the center of a bunch of people who are all just like doing 69ers in a circle. And that was probably one of my highlights, was just like where the fuck am I? Like,
oh my God, amazing.
Yeah.
So wait, are we talking like 69, like what's that fucking movie? Human Caterpillar, or no, that's not
Human
what
Centipede.
it's called. But yeah, Human Centipede. Is it like that kind of vibe, or like pairs of people 69ing in a circle, or like 1-to-1, like a massage train but 69ing?
Yeah, it was like a massage train but 69ing.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've done the same group of people. We've done there was one that I went to just in September. It was called the Fuck Festival, and it was the first festival that I've been to since COVID, and there was the Sex Olympics, and these guys started off the Sex Olympics with what they described as plug of war, and it was a butt plug, and there were the butt plugs were tied together, and then it was who could hold on to the butt plug for the longest while moving away from one another.
Oh, so, my God.
Yeah, so and I just, the most joy that I get is just like having I like to get very creative with sex, and I love being silly. I love it when those worlds come together and it can be theatrical and ridiculous. And so, there's been quite a few moments where I've looked around and just been like, wow, like this is my community. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like,
what is my life?
Great.
This is the best.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So those are some of the wonderful wild things. And, apart from that, I just, I'm bisexual, and I just really love sharing women with my husband. And popping cherries and all the yummy shit.
Wow. Oh my God. We could do a whole episode on the fuckfest sex Olympics. That just sounds so, oh my God. Wow. Because I love anything creative. Like I'm not super kinky personally, but I love inventing. Like Lockie and I invent these like hilariously just creative, like imaginary sexual scenarios or like combo moves, we call them. And like most of them are probably pretty much physically impossible. Or we would just like not do them because we're both pretty vanilla nil. But we come up with like funny situations and names for them and stuff. And like we've got a friend who is an amazing artist, and sometimes we'll get him to do a drawing of it. So I'm so with you on the like creativity and like playful silliness front. Like, you know, I'm having a butt plug tug of war sounds like my worst nightmare, but it's also the fucking best concept. Like that's so funny. I wish I could be a what like a oh my God, what is it called when there's like people
like
that watch?
Referee or...
Oh,
a
yeah,
spectator
that too, I guess. Yeah, just a spectator.
yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
it's fantastic. I love that creativity. Like that's one of the things that's probably most important to me in my sexual endeavors is like having someone that is willing to explore different things and get creative. And you know, and also with that, it really allows for like having conversation about, you know, oh, well, this doesn't work, but what about if we tried this? Like, what happens if we, you know, A plus B equals what? Like, what is on the other side? And I find that really fascinating, and I love nerding out to that.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you guys are never gonna get bored or let the spark die by the sounds of it.
Hopefully that's the plan.
So I'm wondering, like, when you were younger and you were starting to dabble in this, did you kind of have to process or let go of or heal any shame around this sort of thing, like before you could embrace it as a lifestyle? Because obviously you've well and truly embraced it. And, you know, giving golden showers when you were 14 probably shows that there wasn't a whole lot of shame to get around. I don't know. But like, yeah, what was your process with that? Because obviously we can't really avoid a lot of the conditioning and the negative attitudes and beliefs around sexuality and all of that sort of taboo and stigma. What's been your journey with that?
Yeah. I don't know how this happened. I don't know. I just, it doesn't make sense to me either. But I didn't ever have shame around sexuality, even when my parents found out that I'd lost my virginity at 13. And, you know, like my mum said some really hurtful shit. And I still did not feel shame. I just felt like, why is no one fucking listening? Like and I have this thing that I go back to all the time. And this is just like a universal thing that I apply to everything. And that is, if I'm experiencing this, I'm not the only one. And that has always helped me to just get over like whatever it is. And so, and I don't know, like I just haven't had to try hard to get over any of that, where it's like, you know, I knew from a very, very young age that I was an exhibitionist and, you know, very voyeuristic. And, I knew, when I was 13, I knew that I wanted to be a sex educator in some capacity. And that largely came from feeling like I'd been failed in my education, like, you know, and I was still like just 13. But yeah, so I knew that, as I progressed through life, probably as like, maybe like early 20s or something, I knew that I wanted to be a dominatrix, and I knew that I would at some stage. And I'm, you know, really thankful that, you know, I've been around people that have been doing that, and it's been accepted. It was just more of like well, how do I do that? So, but yeah, I've never allowed shame to really take grip of me. And just because I realize that I'm a human, and if I'm a human and experiencing these thoughts and desires and feelings, well, then there's others out there. And I think that that's one of the things that always has propelled me to ask for what I've wanted. And as I said at the start of this podcast, like, I found that when I ask for what I want, I usually get it. And it definitely can draw attention, some unwanted attention. And I've become very quick at discerning, like, yeah, that's not what I'm after. Like, no. And just like knowing and like, I guess like, yeah, just feeling like, knowing what's in alignment for me and what is not. But I believe that everyone should be able to express themselves in a safe way, free from shame and judgment. And I really think that the world is exciting and that we get to choose and indulge in whatever we like. And that's really fucking cool. So let's just start asking for what we want, and also realizing that, it can be hard to ask for what we want, especially as women, because we're socialized to just be polite and kind of, shut down and very ladylike. And it's not very ladylike to be like, I want to get fisted. But, that's a fucking reality. Like, sometimes we want to just get fisted or, whatever the fuck it is. And so we should be able to ask for that. So yeah, that's totally. My take anyway.
Fuck yeah. Damn. Stay up on that soapbox. You got some good shit to say, girl. I totally agree. Like, and it's so amazing and rare and quite mystifying how you actually wound up just never really having any shame. I guess you were an old soul and you just like knew innately that like there is nothing to be ashamed about. And, you had a bit of a mission from the beginning to like set out and change the face of sex ed and like offer resources to people that you didn't have. But yeah, really cool and interesting to hear that like you just didn't have that shame even when you were like reprimanded for losing your virginity or whatever else. And that leads me to my next question is like, what do your parents or your family, I mean, do they know about this? What do they think of it if they do? Or is it like a total double life that they don't know about in terms of like your pro-domming and having a house slave and stuff?
Yeah, so that is the one area of my life that is not integrated. And that's purely just because I don't think that my parents are ready to hear it at all. Yeah. Like, I've had conversations with them about my open marriage, and as soon as I start to talk about that, they're like, oh, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. So I just know that they're not ready for that yet. That said, I am someone who, I live in a different country to my parents as well, and I have done for like over 10 years. And since moving away from my hometown, and also actually being there, that was one of the reasons that I moved away, is because I'm really bad at lying and I don't feel like I should have to. And when someone's living in a small town and everyone knows everyone and it's very narrow-minded, it's difficult to be wild because everyone's kind of judging you and, people are getting upset with you. So it was a good move for me to move away. And I know that one day it will happen and they will get to meet my slave, but it's hard for them to understand my life, especially from a distance. And so everyone that has met my slave and seen our dynamic is, they always say like, wow, like you really have to be around you guys to actually understand that it's not even dark. It's just so full of love. It's weird and wacky, but it's so full of love. And there's far more sweetness and love than there is creepiness. And so I feel like if I was to have a conversation with my parents and be like, hey, mom and dad on Zoom or whatever, and I have this thing that I need to tell you, like it would just fucking crush them. And so I'm very much a fan of like framing things and like orchestrating things to happen in a way where they can be, we can have the best opportunity to present information and to guide people into the places that they need to be. And so, eventually my parents will know, but at the moment, especially with COVID, it's more a thing of like, they would need to come out to see me and actually get to see that whole dynamic before I then drop that bomb on them and blow their fucking mind. Maybe just a little.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so important to just be really tactful and sensitive about this, because it's not, you shouldn't have to hide a part of yourself, and it would be ideal if you could integrate all aspects of your life and, have them be part of it and accepting of that and whatever. But they're of a different generation. They're probably, like you said, not ready for it. They're not going to understand or even have the capacity to understand. And I think, like, especially out of context, these things are just too far out for some people. And there's too many, I guess, misconceptions and assumptions about the BDSM lifestyle and elements of it that people just really don't understand or have their own judgments around. And especially boomers, I feel like, that aren't of that ilk would probably find it like so fucking shocking. So I think, making sure to deliver it in a way where you can kind of control, over Zoom is pretty out of control, pretty out of context. It's just, that would probably be a disaster. So I totally think, you're going about it in a wise way. And it's like, sometimes it's not fair to drop that on people when they're just not ready and they're not able to handle that information or know what to do with it. It's like kind of cruel almost. And it sucks that you have to like manage your parents' feelings, but like sometimes you just do have to manage other people's feelings and just be thoughtful about how much information you let them have and how you give that information to them, and then helping them understand. It's almost like you've got to do aftercare for those conversations as well. So, and I wanted to talk a bit about aftercare because you mentioned it earlier, and I'd love to, because I think that's a beautiful, and not like, there's misconceptions around this sort of thing. And I think some people who don't understand it properly might not realize that there's actually a crazy amount of ground rules and communication and agreements and like negotiation beforehand. And then there's also the aftercare. And I think it's so much like, when I understood that just transformed the whole realm. And I was like, wow, this is actually so beautiful. And I feel like people who delve into this world probably have fuckloads more, like way better communication skills and like empathy and ability to, like, I don't know, if they're doing it properly, I feel like they have a lot more skills in those areas of relating than the average person in, like, say, just like a stock standard monogamous relationship, because you have to do it in a safe and responsible way. You have to have those skills and you have to take the time to do that. So I'd love you to speak into that if you could. Excuse the interruption, my loves, but I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab. And the more people who get to hear it, the more people it can help. Reviews and ratings help me curry favour with the algorithmic gods and get suggested to other listeners to check out. Plus, they make me feel really good and appreciated as I continue to pour my heart and soul into creating this baby for you. And I promise I don't mazz over them or anything. I mostly just tuck them away for a rainy day when I'm filled with self-doubt and existential dread about being self-employed, which is fairly frequently. So you see, leaving a review really does make a difference, and it's an easy little act of support that you can take in just a minute or two by either going to Spotify and leaving 5 stars for the show, or writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Choose your poison, or if you're a real overachiever, you could do both. Whoa now. If you are writing a review though, just be sure to only use G-rated words, because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't actually show up. Lame. Anyway, oh, what was that? Oh, you're going to go do it right now while I wait. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a great idea. May as well just quickly click that 5-star button before we get on with it and, forget about it and get on with your day. I'm hearing them roll in. I'm hearing those 5 stars. Oh my God, I make myself cringe. Anyway, thank you much, Lee. You're a total gem, and I'll let you get back to the episode now.
Yeah, so negotiations, as I said earlier, like usually I would have an application form, like an extensive application form filled in so that I know I have a bunch of information about them, and that will include like what their triggers are, what their hard limits are, like what their desires are, and all of those things that will help me form an idea of like how to guide that session. Also things that they may be open to, and emphasis on the may, because like there's a lot of trust, like someone is trusting you to take them on a journey. And when someone is in subspace, they are very fucking vulnerable. And so there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And so, you're essentially taking them on a journey, and they're trusting you to do that, and navigating that can be incredibly beautiful. It's also incredibly hard at times because you're essentially having to mind read. And so, you obviously, are going to communicate throughout, but, when someone is like deep in subspace, like often, they've checked out somewhat.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you have to really navigate that with with care. And then in terms of aftercare, I would always, prior to the session, like check in with them about aftercare, like what kind of aftercare do they like? What kind of aftercare do they need? And, some people, part of their aftercare is just like wrapping up and disappearing very quickly. And when that is what they want, I think it's really important to check in with them later, because sometimes they're leaving in such a rush because that's a lot to fucking process. And as I said, with the post-cum version of especially males, that is, it's just very different to how vagina owners actually present once they've come. So there's that. But, hopefully, and what I really enjoy about aftercare is if I can be with someone, and I always make the space for this, but making the space for that person to be held, whether that's just emotionally or physically or both. And really just taking like some time to wind down without rushing that person out, and making sure that, they've got a really gentle landing, because, you're leaving that headspace where it's like, you went really fucking deep. And, you might have tried like so many different things. And also, they might have been stretched or, like had like physical things happen where it's like their body has taken some kind of impact, or, their body will feel different. So, I like to make space to care for that, for the physical, and just really like a gentle, like psychological landing, like afterwards for that. And then also like checking in with them like in the maybe like 3 or so days afterwards, just to see how they've gone with their processing of that. And some people are just so matter of fact and will be like, yeah, I'm cool, yeah, great. Especially males, because we're all aware that they aren't as skilled and encouraged in talking about their emotions. But yeah, like making space for that at least.
Beautiful. I love that. It's so important. So yeah, that's really nice to hear some examples of how you go about that, and different ways depending on the sort of session that you've had and things. Amazing. Have you been hearing my rooster just going off his little fucking chops out there?
I have not.
Oh my God, good. Okay, cool. I wasn't sure. It's like, so he's standing outside the fucking window just having a massive crow off like a king dick. He's just learned how to crow, little shit. And it's been like so loud. So I'm really glad that that's not coming through the mic. Anyway, there he goes. So I've got a few more questions before we finish, but are you ready for TMI? We love it.
TMI, we love it. TMI, we love it.
Oh yes, yes. I took some time because I have so many, and I had to ask my husband, like, is this really TMI? Because some of the stuff that I've done is really deeply TMI, and it, people wouldn't want to eat afterwards. But I think I found one that is hilarious and fitting.
Oh, fuck yeah. Oh my God. I'd want to do a whole episode of TMI with you. I just feel like you'd have so many epic stories. So maybe we'll chat about that down the track because you are like a jackpot. But yeah, hit me.
So when I first started to go for pedicures with my slave, and we would go, there was both myself, my slave, and then the other Dom that I would do sessions with. And he would take us both for pedicures. And we went to this little salon, and before we'd gone, we'd had this conversation where he was just really fucking awkward. And he was like, Goddess, like, do you think that I could maybe have the nails from the salon? And I was like, yeah, I don't give a fuck, like, whatever, like, take them, I don't care. But he's he's just such a sweet little boy that like he was just like really embarrassed and like did not know how to like navigate that whole thing, And I mean, he's like a 50-year-old man, and just turned into this like little infantile thing. Could not verbalize. So anyway, I took control like I usually do in that situation, and we went to this salon, and I just walked in there like a boss and sat down, and I told these ladies that I wanted to collect all of the foot dust and the toenail clippings and stuff. And they obviously looked at me like I was mad. And I just said to them, oh yeah, like I'm just collecting it for a Burning Man project. I'm going to make this like big, like huge cake. And it's just going to be made out of body waste.
Oh my God.
That was the end of the conversation. And then we would go into this salon like repeatedly, and they just, every time it was like we just didn't speak about it unless they'd like forgotten a chunk, or I could see a chunk of stuff, and I was like, oh no, like there's some over there, like you need to get that too. And so yeah, that's and then he would just take them away and consume them.
Oh, he'd eat them.
Yeah, he likes to eat toenail clippings and foot dust and anything to do with feet.
Toenail clippings, I feel like that would be so tricky to chew and get stuck in your throat. Yeah. But I mean, he must have it figured out. Maybe blends it up in a smoothie.
No, he likes them raw. He likes them on their own. Like, yeah, he's a strange creature. It's a thing. Yeah. Selling your foot dust is a thing.
Wow. That's a goodie. That's a good one. Maybe for his birthday, you could make him a cake out of human waste products. Just foot stuff.
Leave him these little envelopes of stuff, like of foot dust and toenail clippings, which I will say, it takes me a long fucking time to get these little envelopes of stuff. Like, you would be surprised how like little you accumulate over a year. It's ridiculous. And so I have to like really spread it out. And I make these little, like these tiny little envelopes with like various pet names of his, and I hide them around the house when I go on holiday. And then I'll incorporate them into his servitude. So like when he's watering my air plants, I'll like leave a little envelope like facing the glass bottom, so that if he looks hard enough, then he should be able to notice that there's a treat in there for him. Or I left one in the cat shit scooper recently, and I went away for the weekend, and I got back and he hadn't fucking done it. And I was like, well, well, you just don't get your treat then, do you? Because the whole fucking moral of the story is that you should be cleaning up that cat shit, shouldn't you? And now you miss out because you didn't. So, yeah.
Oh, amazing. I can just imagine you like with your pumice stone, catching it all on a bit of paper underneath and hiding it around the house. This is amazing. This is so amazing. I love this. Oh, so I want to know, like, I've touched upon a few of the common misconceptions or things that people misunderstand about BDSM. But I'd love to know if there's any that you want to touch upon and talk about just to like clarify things for people. Like, are there any major, like quite common things that people assume or believe or don't understand that you'd like to explain?
Yeah, there's a few there. I mean, there's my favorite one is the one that I mentioned earlier, that BDSM is not just about beating someone up and telling them that they've been bad or that they're a shit cunt or whatever, but BDSM is actually 80% psychological. So it's a fascinating game of understanding what's going on between those lines. And so, you know, there's a whole world to discover about the psychology of it. And some of my favorite teachers in that world have been, you know, PhD psychologists, and it's just a fascinating like world to learn. And I guess one of the other things that I think is a really common misconception is that you are you're abusing that person. And if you think about it, like if I want to be beaten, like if I come from being beaten, then that's what I want. Like I'm wanting that, which sounds really ridiculous, but there's a lot of people that you know, just assume that it's abuse. And while it like physically looks the same, can look the same, again, it's psychology. Like, and if someone is really getting off on that and you're giving them what they need, then you're actually caring for them, providing that you do it in a safe way. Then that's like you're caring very deeply for their desires and, you know, for the things that they want to experience. So yeah, I think those two things would be the main misconceptions that I, you know, often talk about to people, and it's just so very misunderstood.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, I think it's something I used to think about was like when I would get, I don't know, a client and I really only skimmed the surface of this world. Like I said, it was not really my jam, and I ended up just not really coping with it. I was like, but I don't want to spit on you and hit you and racially slur you. That makes me feel really uncomfortable and sad. So I was like, well, this isn't for me. But you know, some of the things I got asked to do or people like wanted, I was just like, holy fuck, that is pretty hectic. But if it's not done by someone who, like me, actually has like compassion and empathy and understanding and like, you know, is ethical and like being kind of responsible about this, then it could fall into the hands of like someone who would be doing it for the wrong reasons. And like, I don't know, I was just like, I guess, worried about these people who are putting themselves in really vulnerable situations, which is very trusting. And I was like, oh shit, there's probably people out there that would be taking advantage of that. And yeah, I don't know, I used to kind of think, well, better me than someone who, but you know, there would also be better people than me who were actually like professionals who actually really, really got into it. So in the end, I was like, oh, look, it's not my my responsibility. They'll find someone perfect for them, and I am not that person. And yeah, just have to trust that they wouldn't fall into the hands of someone really toxic and irresponsible. Because like, yeah, I guess this might be my own ignorance or like assumptions that are coming from, you know, my own, like some deep conditioning or judgment. So like really, I want to like, you know, forgive me if I'm just putting my foot in it or like showing my ignorance, but sometimes I did feel like some of the clients I would meet had these kinks or desires because of some horrific childhood trauma. Like I just assumed, I was like, whoa, like that can't have just come about from nothing. And I also like heard, I can't remember where I read this, but I heard that men are way more likely to have fetishes or kinks, or even like things like pedophilia. It's like way more rampant in men because their sexual kind of preferences and identities solidify and cement at a really young age during puberty compared to females. And so whatever is going on then in their like teenage or childhood years gets kind of stuck in there and can result in like, things like pedophilia, things like fetishes, and it kind of cements, and then that can turn into, certain kinks later on in life. Whereas it's like less common in women because our sexuality and like that part of our brain is more fluid throughout our lives. And I don't know if like there was a long time ago that I read this, and I wish I could kind of reference the study or whatever, but do you know much about this?
I'm not sure about that study. I'm not familiar with that. But what I will say, because, that is something that comes up, and, in terms of like, is it stemming from trauma? And I would say that, it definitely can. Like, there's definitely people out there who are feeding something that, was generated via a traumatic experience. And I think that there's also a misconception as well, actually, that I forgot to mention, that BDSM is therapy. And I really want to just clear that up, because BDSM can be therapeutic. It is not therapy, though. And I think that one of the best things that we can do for someone who is wanting a cathartic release with a fetish that may have been generated or linked to trauma that's been formed earlier in life, is having some good conversation beforehand. And especially, like I said, I really like to do taboo stuff. And so part of wanting to like be in that world is, well, you have to really do the groundwork. And so I would say that it would be down to the individuals to talk about that. And if it seems like someone is like in a place that they're operating from trauma, and usually that will show up by like erraticness or like like severe self-hatred that is like not it's clearly not play, like it's not shifting, like it's just consistent. Then that would be some like red flags for me.
Yeah, totally. And what do you do in that situation? Do you not take on those clients? Or is there a way that you can navigate it, or do you refer them to getting some therapy or?
Yeah, I think therapy is always something that I would recommend to anyone, if, regardless of whether it's BDSM or not. Like, if I can see that someone needs help, I would always direct them in that way. But we're especially in the world of BDSM, where people do have that common misconception, and when I say people, often it is the sub and the dom, because like there's a lot of dominatrixes out there who they're not so ethical, and they do just want to brand what they're doing as therapy, but it's not. And it can be cathartic, though, and there's nothing to say that an experience that fulfills someone's desires can't be healing and cathartic and also scratch that itch. But it's very difficult to navigate because you don't want to be feeding any kind of any trauma or ideas about, you know, being stuck or broken and so on. So yeah, I think it requires some conversation, and, you know, I hope that people do have those conversations more.
Yeah, totally. Amazing. Well, hopefully this episode starts a few conversations. And so just lastly, like, I'd love to know if there's like a place, if you wanted to like suggest some, I'll pop the links in the show notes, but are there some good places to start if a person was wanting to explore this realm? Like, it's often a bit daunting, and like, you know, when I tried to dabble, I didn't really have anyone to point me in the right direction. So I was kind of just like, yeah, out there trying to Google it and find my way. And yeah, I think it would be a bit more responsible, and definitely a better way to go about it if people knew where to start, like just to begin their journey with exploring this. Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion, though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also have a Sunroom profile over on the Sunroom app, as I've mentioned. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps, because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. And I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later.
Yeah, great question. And I can totally relate. I spent a lot of time in my 20s. I'm now 32, but I spent a lot of time in my 20s just being like, I want to be a dominatrix. How do I do that? And like, you know, just people not really giving me any kind of resources, even though they were in the scene. And, you know, I will say that I think there's a lot of protectiveness that happens over like not giving resources to people that want to try that out, because as I said, it is a very saturated place to be as a dom. That said, there's 2 different kind of categories really. There's real life, which obviously would happen at a dungeon, and that usually when you're working at a dungeon, they want you to sign up for an apprenticeship essentially, which takes a number of years. And usually you have to start off as a submissive so that you actually know what it feels like to be a submissive. That said, not everyone is authentically a submissive, and not everyone likes being beaten, or, you know, so that kind of ethically can be something to consider, and you know, obviously don't do anything that doesn't feel aligned for you. In the other world that I want to talk about, which is the online world, I have a bunch of resources. So Princess Kali is one of my favorite teachers, and she has a bunch of different offerings, and she's been doing this for a very long time. She's also the founder of Kink Academy, which is such a huge database of videos and articles about all different fetishes and kinks, from like, you know, flogging and whipping to like urethral sounding and all sorts of shit. You can find it all there. What is that?
What is urethral sounding?
It's my new favorite thing that I haven't tried on myself yet, but I really want to, and it grosses my husband out. And I'm hoping he'll get over that. Urethral sounding is where you insert, it has nothing to do with sound necessarily, although you can apply like a tuning fork or something. But urethral sounding is the insertion of a metal kind of like stick, if you will, like my words are failing me right now. It's just like a metal medical
rod?
Instrument, and you can put that. Yes, rod. Perfect. Yes. A metal rod that you insert down the urethra, and that can be done to a man or a woman. And so, yeah, it gives a lot of people the heebie-jeebies because, you know, urethra and stuff and putting shit down there, and they come in different thicknesses too. So, but you can vibrate them, and you can do various different things. And I'm very interested in this at the moment, but I've not done it. I haven't given it, and I haven't received it, but I really want to receive that. I love medical play.
Okay. So is it supposed to be pleasurable, or it's more just like the sensation and the like wow factor of like something going up your pee hole?
I mean, it would be pleasurable for those people who like medical play and things inserted into strange places. I also really like having speculums inserted into me. And so if you're into medical play, I think, you know, urethral sounding is something that will, you know, come up in conversation, or, you know, like you'll soon be made aware of urethral sounding if you're dabbling in the medical play kind of world. So yes, that is urethral sounding. And also I would say that that's definitely not something you just want to go and like, you know, have at. You want to do that with a lot of care, and you want to do it with someone who actually knows what the fuck they're doing. Because I found out recently that with a woman's urethra, that you only have like a very, very small amount of room. I think it was like 2 centimeters of room to kind of like, you know, play with before you're actually like at a risky point in a woman's anatomy.
Like so, lengthwise or width?
Definitely. Lengthwise.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
It, you know, it kind of, it goes behind from what I understand, it goes behind the clitoris, which is where the pleasure element of it is often for most. But also it's very close to the bladder, and you don't want to fuck with the bladder. So, you know, and women and UTIs and all that stuff. So
totally.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Carry on.
So back to resources. So that was Kink Academy that have all these wonderful things. And then the Wicked Alliance as well is a fantastic group of women, and they are doing a lot of different workshops for online dominatrixes. Also Ms. Kim, that's MZKIM. She does a lot of stuff with Night Flirt, which is basically like a you know, they have like calls and texts, and you can sell your goodies and videos and stuff on there too. So she does a lot of stuff in that realm, and she's worked in that realm for quite some time. And then another favorite of mine is Amberly Rothfield, and she is she has such a special place in my heart, and I'm still doing coaching with her, and just a pure alchemist, and very, very knowledgeable. And yeah, I love that person. She's very special. Cool. Yeah. So that would be my online resources.
Fabulous. I'll put the links in the show notes for anyone who's interested. I did just think of a question I completely neglected to ask, and that's about money. Like, how much money are you making, and is your house slave paying you? You know, is there like what's, you know, tell me a little bit about money, not to just be like, you know, everyone should get into domming because you make fuckloads of money, because I think that's another thing that, like, that's where I was at. I was like, oh my God, you make like $500 for doing like, for just yelling at someone and kicking them in the balls. Like, this is awesome. You know?
Yeah, I mean, that can definitely happen for sure. when I was doing it in real life, I was charging $300 for an hour. I believe so, 300 or 250. But that was for two of us. There was two of us doing that. So, you know, that's a bit different. And I was only doing double sessions in real life before the pandemic. So yeah, but if you go on like Eros, you can get a really good idea of what people are charging. And obviously the more experience someone has, you know, the higher their rates will be. And in terms of online, like it really, really varies. Like usually via video, it's like per minute. And one of my favorite things, and there's lots of different platforms too. So like sometimes you're like on Sext Panther, you are getting paid to sext. And so, you know, that's, you know, you can set your rate up for, you know, how much per text, I believe. And yeah, and same with Night Flirt as well. Like you set your rate for your calls and stuff. And yeah, as per my slave, I completely own my slave's finances. He has his allowance, which I don't really intervene much with. Like I could, if I wanted to be like really hands-on and be like, you know, you get this amount of money to spend on your groceries and that's it. And he would make it work too, because he's like, you know, such a minimalist. But I don't like living in that way. I want him to have, you know, the things that he needs. Yeah. And so I get all of the overflow. And, you know, I'm also like the beneficiary in his life insurance and all of those things. So it's pretty deep. But yeah. So there's all that too.
Amazing. Oh my God. I need to get myself a house slave. No, I've already tried that. I'm just not cut out for it. Yeah, well, I'm glad you found like the golden goose, like unicorn situation. It sounds pretty idyllic. And thank you so much for being so open and really generous with your stories and your information and honesty. Is there anything, just one last question, is there anything that you want to like tell people, you know, say they're feeling like abnormal or like they're broken or they're alone? Because you were saying like, luckily for you, you didn't feel alone in this, like your main kind of thing that you always came back to was like, well, if I'm experiencing this and feeling this and desiring this, then there must be other people also experiencing this. But I feel like, you know, through my work, I do hear a lot of people say like, oh, I know it's weird and I know like I'm probably the only one, and people feel quite alone and as though they're wrong or they're weird or they're abnormal. So is there any like reassurances or anything you'd like to just like put out there to tell people, you know, just to reassure them like, it's okay, you are totally normal. That's, you know, you're not alone in this.
Yeah. I will go back to my statement from before and just remind people like, and, you know, use this as a mantra as well. Like, if you are experiencing something, whether that's a thought or, you know, a time in your life where things feel tricky and, you know, complex, you're not going to be the only person that has ever experienced that. And therefore you're not alone. And I would say, you know, in conjunction with that I believe that we are all here to find a place of belonging, and ultimately that I think that is what we're all searching for, is a place to belong, or, you know, people to belong with. And one of the things that absolutely changed my life with my feelings of where I belong as a complete weirdo was actually getting involved with the burner community. And that it's not just a festival. In fact, it's not a festival at all. It's a temporary community that sets up, but also that community exists all year round, and it is so fucking enriching and liberating to be a part of. And there are regional burns all over the world. So if this is something that you've never heard of before, I recommend that people look at Burning Man and regional burns and get involved. And it's, you know, a beautiful, liberating community and lifestyle to be a part of, and that everyone that I've spoken to who is a part of that community has always, you know, approached it because they were looking for more from life, or they were looking for their place to be, and that is something that people find there. And I can't encourage people to go enough. It really does change your life, and there is something for everyone there, and it feels like family.
That's the thing. There is something for everyone. Like, no matter how out there or strange you think it might be, there is someone for everyone, and there is some place for everyone. And I find, like, I haven't been to Burning Man in the States, but I've been to like the equivalents, the regional ones in Australia. There's Blazing Swan in WA. There's Burning Seed in New South Wales. And yeah, even if you can't go to the physical festivals, there's the online burner communities. And I do really feel like, yeah, if you're seeking belonging, if you're seeking like acceptance and a place to be radically self-expressive and find community that are going to be non-judgmental and like supportive and encouraging, that is a fabulous place to start. So that's a really good suggestion. Thank you, Miss K. I've had the best fucking time. This has been awesome. I'd love to get you back on in the future. I'm sure this episode will spark a lot of questions and interest from my audience. And yeah, thank you so much. I will mention really quickly before I stop pressing record that I now have Labia Lounge merchandise on my website. I've got like a fanny pack, I've got tote bags and like whatever, but there's like some funny things. There's like a one-piece bathing suit, there's like male jocks. I mean, the fanny pack is definitely my favorite. But yeah, there's Labia Lounge merch. Head to my website to grab some of that if you like. And Miss Kay, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad that this exists, and thank you for doing this. I'm so grateful.
Oh, no, it's my honor and my privilege. You've been one of my favorite guests so far. This has been a blast. I'll speak to you soon.
Aww. Love you. Bye.
Bye. And that's it, darling hearts. Thank you for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. And in the meantime, if you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that, my dear, is a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism. And you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. Also, I'm always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, or guest suggestions. So feel free to get in touch via my website at freyagraph.com, or say hey over on Insta. My handle is Freya_graph_YMT, and I seriously hope you're following me on there, because damn, we have fun. Anyway, later labial legends. I'll see you next time.